And today we have with us Mr. Omer Ghaznavi. Mr. Omer Ghaznavi is the co-founder and managing director at Davaam. He has had a long and far-stretching career, actually, from consultancy, management consultancy, strategy, marketing, project development, and lots of other things in the credit markets and in the debt markets. Am I right about that, Omer?
Yes, Asad, you're right.
Yeah.
I haven't been able to hold down an industry for 3 years before I met waste management.
All right, and now he's in, well, as you heard it, waste management. Davaam is an energy solutions company, then aggregator for energy solutions, for providing not just alternatives to your energy solutions, to what you might be using conventionally in your businesses or at your homes, but then also they are working in the waste management landscape and moving towards sustainable living as a whole, with a lot of projects in the pipeline in that regard. So, Omer, thank you very much for coming on to
My
Mike's On.
pleasure.
And
My pleasure.
just to recap, so Mike's On is a conversation based around mindset, innovation, communication, sustainability. And that's exactly why we have Omer with us today to talk about sustainable steps. What can you expect for your business in the near future? What can you expect to see on a global level? And some mistakes that we've made in our past and how we can try to solve those or try to reduce those repercussions just a little bit. So, Omer, let's dive
Yeah.
straight into it with the pandemic, with the lockdown. We've had this conversation before also that we started seeing the birds chirping. Yes, people were sick. World economies did shut down. Lots of money was lost. Lots of business was lost. People's livelihoods did go down. But at the same time, if we were to zoom out a little bit as just human beings, we saw the skies clear up a little bit. We saw an environmental change happen. We saw that in China, there was a reduction in nitrogen levels, a drastic reduction in nitrogen levels just in China alone. And in Pakistan, we saw the same thing. Um, so, as a result of this pandemic, just purely on an environmental level, what do you think are some lessons that we've learned as human beings?
Well, look, I think what it has done for us is it's given us a pause, which allows us to actually take a look at how we've been living throughout. And yes, you're right. You do notice the birds. It's probably also because you have a lot more time on your hands and you're stuck
Yeah.
in your house. So you notice these things which are there every day. If you wake up early enough or you go to sleep late enough, you'll probably hear these birds anyways. But yes, you're right. The pollution levels have dropped down. But more importantly, I think probably the biggest thing that people will see is that they don't need to consume as much as they did pre whatever has happened in the last couple of months. The way that we were living meant everything was disposable, everything could be used, thrown out. I think, while a lot of people have been suffering because they're struggling to, especially the people who are on daily wages, they struggle on a day-to-day basis. But people who are in jobs or who have some sort of business or a steady stream of income, I think the one thing that they must have noticed is that their budgets don't need to be as big as they probably thought previously. And so you don't need to consume as much, and therefore you don't need to pollute as much. Whether this is something that we'll take forward once restrictions are eased or not remains to be seen. I'm highly skeptical about whether we'll actually learn a long-term lesson from this on the environmental side in general in the population. I think there's only one news that overtakes everything else, and unfortunately, all of these other things get thrown to the side as soon as we recover.
So I see that sustainability before this time has always been a very overused term. It was thrown around everywhere. Businesses were said to be sustainable, and now, as you said it yourself, consumption levels have gone down drastically. And you're drawing? I'm correct me if I'm wrong, but there's also this parallel or this relationship between consumption and pollution, right? They're directly related.
Absolutely, 100%.
So, what do you feel are those sustainable steps that we do need to take in the future for our businesses or even for ourselves as consumers?
Look, I think one of the things that we always make a mistake with, especially in our industry, in renewable energy or sustainability, if you look at people working in the site, everybody points the finger towards the government, expecting the government to come out and give something, some earth-shattering policy, or some, some groundbreaking policy, or give low-cost financing. There's only so much the government can do. One thing that this kind of shutdown did for me, or this lockdown did for me, was that it it helped me see exactly, even though I try to do things the right way on a day-to-day basis, but the fact is that even my life is not sustainable, nothing even close to being sustainable. The kind of consumption that we have, the way, you know, one of the things that I was noticing was when you said the birds and everything, when I go to pick up my kids from school, you should see the amount of pollution in those areas.
Mm-hmm.
When there are areas in the cities where there are clusters of schools. There are literally thousands and thousands of children coming and going, and each one of those kids is escorted by a car. So that's thousands of cars, converging into this little space, polluting like crazy. People have their ACs running while they're waiting for the kids to come out, and all of that is gone. And those are simple things that can be resolved. Things like we don't really need to go out and consume as much food or as many things that we did previously, and all of those things. The problem, Asad, as you highlighted earlier,
Mm-hmm.
was the problem is that we look at everything from a micro level,
Yeah.
and policies are at a macro level. And it's very, very difficult for individuals to step outside of their own comfort zone, or their own lives, and look at things with a broader perspective about what the far-reaching impact or what kind of far-reaching impact we have. अगर हम कोई एक चीज कंज्यूम कर रहे हैं, या हमारा एक आदत है, हमारे यहाँ वही आदत है कि लोग कचरा अपने घर से बाहर फेंक देंगे, एंड देन दे फॉरगेट अबाउट इट. हम लोग अगर कोई चीज खाएंगे या कुछ पिएंगे, हम उसका कार्टन लेंगे और फेंक देंगे, एंड वी वोंट इवन थिंक ट्वाइस अबाउट इट. इट्स जस्ट something that keeps going on and on every day, and so we don't pay any attention to these things. We don't Nobody, even I didn't, honestly speaking, consider that these t-shirts that we're wearing, or the number of shirts and clothing that we consume, and the amount of water that gets used in making these clothes. All of these things add up.
Mm-hmm.
Visually, if you were to see the amount of water that goes into making a pair of jeans or a pair of trousers or shirts or whatever, I think people would be quite startled to see the amount of water that's gone into producing the end product that they will probably use for 6 months or a year, maybe two max, and then throw away,
Mm-hmm.
and then get something new.
Mm-hmm.
And this is not sustainable. There's just no way in the world that that's sustainable for the long run. I
Right.
think we will see those changes coming up in the future, especially not only because of what's happened now, but because of the economic crisis that's going to follow.
Mm-hmm. So, well, we also are in an economic crisis also, so it's a double whammy in that regard, right? But so let's actually break that down. You mentioned that the clothes that we wear, even in textiles, I'm completely in line with what you're saying about denim, for example, from from the primary stages of of the production process till when it's in the consumer's hand, has just had so much wastage. Not a
Yep.
sustainable process at all. And at the same time, there are these industrialists who are trying to use a more sustainable method of production in some way.
In Pakistan?
I've seen this in Africa. And I've
Yeah,
seen a
okay.
company in San Francisco also, which is using 3D infrared to measure your entire physique so that you can have a sustainable pair of jeans, also, which is kind of cool. But there's also that cost implication, right, in that regard.
Yeah.
So, well, and since you say in Pakistan, that makes me want to ask, in our country, do you think that there is a possibility to move towards sustainable, well, not even production processes, but let's talk about food and bev, right? When we order takeout, there's that plastic bag which the food comes in, the tin foil boxes, the cutlery, all of that. How can we make that process a little more eco-friendly, or if not sustainable?
Eat at home.
Yeah.
No, I mean, okay, look, all jokes aside,
Yeah.
I see this is coming back to the way that we live,
Yeah.
right? it's kind of ridiculous that every household from an affluent family tends to have at least one meal delivered from outside.
Yeah.
We sit at home and we still drink water that's coming out of a plastic bottle.
Yeah.
Um, and we don't think twice about these things. You're saying about denim and clothes. Have you ever seen the amount of water that goes into a steak? Think about the amount of steaks and the amount of meat that we
Yeah.
consume in this country, and the emissions caused by all of those processes, including the animal being fed, the animals letting out their excrements and the waste that they generate, and then following that through the entire process of the meat processing and packing industry. If you actually take a look at everything individually, it's an absolute nightmare.
Hmm.
And for you, the thing that you mentioned about industrialists and sustainable living, look, here are the facts. The Sen government, the High Court actually ordered factories that do dyeing and different processes in industrial processes that put out a lot of polluted water into our system.
Hmm.
They forced them to take action against this, and they threatened a lot of companies with complete shutdown if they did not address the problem of treating their water before disposing of that water into the sewage system.
Hmm.
All of these companies right now have put those things on hold because their mentality is that right now, with everything else that's going on, nobody's going to pay attention.
Hmm.
So the fact is, look, the industry or capitalism on its own dictates that the only thing that the industrial is really interested in is profit at the end of the day,
Right.
right? They're looking at maybe they look at the well-being of the people who work with them or work for them, but beyond that, if we talk about negative externalities, there is no concept of that in Pakistan. Our industrialists do not think like that. Even our large business groups don't think like that. It's
Hmm.
just a fact that we have. And amazingly, हमारे टेक्सटाइल इंडस्ट्री के अंदर स्पेशली जो थोड़ा बहुत सस्टेनेबिलिटी की तरफ पुश आया है, वो सिर्फ इसलिए आया क्योंकि सोलर सस्ता हुआ, डीजल महंगा था. अब डीजल सस्ता हो गया, so everybody saying, oh, we need solar. That's just the way things are. I mean, this is in the space of a couple of weeks where diesel prices have come down substantially. And by the looks of it, they'll stay down there. And you will see that the industry's uptake of solar will fall quite dramatically in this coming year, just because of the fact that they don't see the same kind of return in through the investment in solar as they would have maybe 3 months ago.
Hmm.
These are the realities of Pakistan. So unfortunately, the only role that the government can do is act like the policeman, stand with a danda on the head and
Hmm.
say, okay, clean your water. You're polluting this, clean this.
Hmm.
So yes, you're looking for answers right now. I think
Hmm.
in terms of expecting industry to take notice of these things themselves and care about things, it's not going to happen. I think people will have to force it on them. The reason why this
Okay.
thing happened in the West is because people forced it on their elected representatives, and then they forced companies to take action. And now those companies are forcing their suppliers to take action. But locally, there's no push on these organizations, on the government, or on even on small businesses to actually figure out a more sustainable way of carrying out their businesses.
Fair. And I understand that there's that pure economics aspect of it. Well, right now the economics of it just doesn't fit into their current
Yeah.
business model as well. So, um, keeping this in mind, that um, not just the economics of it, but then also in what direction we need to be going. What are some impact projects that are taking place on a global level that you know about that are actually bringing about a sizable change? And with that change, what are some challenges which those projects have faced?
Well, look, also there are lots of these new technologies and new projects coming up. It's kind of like where the tech industry, or no, I shouldn't say tech, but where the PC industry was probably in the late 80s, early 80s, late 80s, and then the early 90s, where suddenly from having very specialized companies making personal computers, you went to the guy at the end of the street and he could fix you a computer in literally a couple of hours. And that completely changed the dynamics of that industry. And I think even with the renewable side or sustainable living side of things, we're still in the early phase of discovering these technologies, of figuring out the kind of impact that these technologies can have, and how they can change the way industrial processes work or how organizations work on a day-to-day basis, even commercial organizations, schools, colleges, universities, and how that trickles down to the household level. आई थिंक जो एक चीज मिसिंग है पाकिस्तान में बहुत, जिसके बहुत बड़ा गैप है, वो है अवेयरनेस का. सस्टेनेबिलिटी, ग्रीन 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 कह के अपन लोगों को हमने थका दिया. I think making people aware, giving them real practical insight into how damaging a certain product or how damaging a certain common practice is, will allow them to rethink the way that they're living on a day-to-day basis and make the changes appropriately. It has to be a macro effort. So creating that kind of awareness, if you're talking about projects that have had an impact, um, unfortunately, all of the projects there will have a huge impact. I mean, I think one of the good examples are EVs. Personally, I
Mm-hmm.
don't think EVs are the real answer for the future. But what EVs have done is we're taking a look at how we use, uh, the industry, logistics industry, and the large scale transport industry.
Mm-hmm.
Big changes will come with trains, trucks, buses, public transport. It doesn't mean that if you buy a low cost EV and you start using that's going to have that huge impact. It's not, because EVs come with their own set of challenges. But when you start looking at public transport, when you start looking at assets which will be around for 20, 25, 30 years and give you a return over those 30 years, those are the things that are going to start making an impact. If you're looking for actual examples, there's lots of these new things that are working in different places. A lot of these companies are using projects, Africa and South America and even parts of Asia, as breeding grounds to see the impact that these things have. There were a couple of projects where there's this one particular favorite project of mine called Rivers from the Seas, which was carried out by, I believe, university in the United States. I'm not sure which state, so I won't say that, but there's a university and a professor from that university that carried out this project first in Eritrea in Africa. What these guys did, in my mind, is far greater than just creating a project which uses seawater to get food growing, and get mangroves in and get things like fish and shrimp farming. They were using that water flow to do all of these things at the same time. That's just a small example. There's lots of new technologies in power storage. We only know about lithium ion and the typical batteries that we've seen over the past few decades. Now, lithium ion is relatively new, but it's still probably not the best solution when it comes to large scale power generation and power storage systems. When we come to that, there are things like flow batteries. They're using molten salt for storing power. I think the conundrum of being able to store power economically, in an economically viable way, will dictate how the uptake of renewable energy in the future. The problem with renewables is that base load becomes an issue.
Mm-hmm.
Coal, fuel, furnace oil, gas, these things can give you power 24/7, 365.
Yeah.
Solar can't do that. Wind can't do that unless you have some kind of storage backing it up, for the nighttime, or you have storage for when the wind isn't really blowing as hard, things like that. So I think power storage will dictate how things will move in the next 5 to 10 years. And I think what's more exciting than trying to look for examples in the past is what's coming up in the next 3 to 5 years. The technologies that are going to come up in the next 3 to 5 years, there's some really staggering research work that's being carried out across the board. And you might actually see EVs being eclipsed by some other more efficient fuel. It could be hydrogen fuel cells, although a lot of people will disagree with that. But it could be some form of fuel cell. EVs don't, with heavy lithium-ion batteries, which can create some problems in case of accidents. A lot of companies have dealt with those issues, but I'm sure that in time, given time, inventors and large corporations will come up with a solution for transport, and I think that will be a major breakthrough. जो आपको चिड़ियों की आवाज आ रही है और साफ आसमान नजर आ रहा है and you can see the stars outside, that's dictated by the fact that we don't have as many cars on the road.
Yeah. And with EVs, then that's a year-round, all-day kind of phenomenon. Then,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Probably not EVs in their current form. But yeah, 5 years down the line, I think we'll see dramatic change. I don't think, I'm very sure that we will see dramatic change. And I think this thing will also move to the industry, because the two major polluters are the industry and then transport, which we see or feel on a day-to-day basis in mega cities or big cities like Karachi or Lahore or Faisalabad, and even Islamabad. If you go in the summers, it's quite crazy to land into Islamabad, and it's like a bowl that's caught all the pollution with the Margala Hill surrounding that, and it's terrible.
Yeah. But I want to come back actually to a point that you made in this in the past few minutes, was awareness. And yes, there might not be some solid impact projects taking place in Pakistan, or they might be in the grassroots stages right now. But that and you mentioned that awareness is actually key in making those happen. Now,
Yeah.
it seems that we've always considered, you know, a pollution-free lifestyle or a sustainable living um, option as, or just the fact that we should stay clean and hygienic as something which is um, more that you hear from educated households, from affluent backgrounds. How do we actually make that, or how do we spread that awareness to all socioeconomic backgrounds?
Okay, I have to I don't agree with that point at all. Okay, the
Okay,
fact
perfect,
is,
great.
the fact is that the richer you are, the more you pollute.
Yeah.
That's just a fact of life. The more money you have, the more you're going to consume, the more you're going to pollute. You're going to throw out,
I do want to pause you there one
you're
second.
going to,
I understand that.
yeah.
What I mean is that the knowledge of it, that awareness, is that you will see in more affluent households that, don't throw your trash on the streets, even though you might actually
Does
be
it?
polluting
I know
more.
you say, I know you say that.
Hmm.
Don't throw trash. You show me
Hmm.
one street in DHA in Karachi, which is probably one of the most affluent areas in Karachi.
Yeah,
Show me one street that doesn't have garbage lying on the corner.
I can't point one. I get your
So,
point.
so
Yeah.
the so my point is, I know this question has actually come up in the past. I
Hmm.
was at a university giving a talk, and one of the students asked me, uh, well, the terminology she used, I won't use that, but there was this very condescending tone about people who don't have the kind of resources and they're not aware and they create all this pollution. No, actually, those are the people that clean our streets. They're the ones who clean up our water. They are the ones who are delivering clean water to us. And they have to go back and live in areas that don't have budgets even to do basic sewage treatment, or even, they have open nullies. We know how things are in the areas where all these people live in. Yet we expect them to come into our houses and suddenly be, aware of the environment. They're more worried about the next meal. I think if we talk about something, education has to be done. Number one, to the educated class. They are the ones who are polluting. They are the ones who are the problem. And they are the ones who need to take responsibility for their actions. If we educate them, the rest of the lot will start coming into place. It's easy to inform people. Look, I'll give you an example. Actually, I just thought of this. One of the great projects that's coming up, and again, I can't really comment on how real that project is and what the numbers are because I haven't witnessed it myself. But the tree planting, the billion trees tsunami thing, that's a fantastic project. If you think about creating awareness, creating livelihood for people, and getting people from all economic, political, religious backgrounds to come together on something. Nobody has a problem with planting trees.
Hmm.
Everybody understands that planting trees is good. That's a good start. Now, if the affluent areas were clean and the people living in affluent areas did not ask or throw their garbage right outside their neighbor's house or at the end of their own street, then maybe people would come in and learn better ways of living. But when somebody who doesn't make as much money comes into an affluent area in Pakistan right now, they see excessive consumption. They see a lot of stuff being thrown out, and they see an attitude where nobody really cares of the repercussions. So, I think it's kind of rich for us to sit here and talk about how to include them. They're not the problem. We are. People from areas with lower income levels don't have the facilities, don't have the support, I think if we were to provide the same kind of facilities in there, where okay, we still have kachra lying on the corner of our streets, but if you go there, that's widespread. Kachra everywhere, jal raha hai, नाले खुले हुए हैं, वो वाले मसले हम लोग तो देख के और हम अपना मुंह मोड़ के आगे चले आते हैं. But we expect them to learn hygiene and being clean and learning about the environment and all of those nice things. The 3 R's: reuse, recycle, reduce. What they can't reduce, they're at bare minimum. They're thinking about the next meal or how to put their kids through school at a very basic level. Schools are one way to go and do this. One of our biggest one of the biggest things that we do at Davaam, and which we never give up on, is go to schools, go to colleges, go to universities. Anybody who will listen, you teach the kids. You teach the kids about the right way to live. You're not going to teach somebody like me who's, towards the second half of their life to change their ways. And people in the generations beyond me, you can forget about it. It's not going to happen. What we need to do is concentrate on the younger generations. You need to go to the school level, teach them. They will make the lives of their parents miserable if they understand that we shouldn't be wasting water, that we shouldn't be throwing garbage outside, that we shouldn't be just burning stuff which is lying on the corner of the road. If they start taking responsibility and ownership, if we start taking responsibility and ownership of our areas, maybe we'll start taking ownership of our city or of the larger areas that we live in, things will start changing. But we don't think like that. We think in a very micro perspective. हम लोग बहुत ही छोटी सोच है हमारी, घर से आगे नहीं सोचते हैं. It doesn't matter कि आप अमीर हैं या गरीब हैं, घर से आगे अमीर आदमी नहीं सोचता. That's the fact. So maybe change that, and we got to change that through the younger generations.
That's actually really well put, and I think that it's like you said, hum ghar se aage nahi sochte, and
Yep.
which is why we have these conversations. These conversations have been going on for many years, and my personal opinion is that they always stay at that standstill.
Yeah.
And action is now coming. I do feel that there's this fight now which is happening towards actually trying to reverse whatever changes have happened, or trying to reduce the impact of all of our consumption patterns and all of our poor decisions in the past now. But I don't want to be the one to say that it's a little too late for that. Hopefully,
No,
it will.
look, it's never going to be too late, right?
Yeah.
There's always something that people come up with. Human beings are incredible creatures. So we do come up with solutions. Sometimes we just come up with those too late. Hopefully it won't be too late this time.
Fingers crossed.
You're looking for solutions.
Yeah.
Solutions have to be big impact projects right now. And Pakistan mein big impact is easy, relatively easy. We don't need to go and talk about getting something like Tesla in Pakistan. It won't make that big an impact. We can't afford those expensive vehicles. The fact is that EVs are insanely expensive. That's not going to happen in the short run in Pakistan. No matter what kind of excitement there is, at a certain level there will be changes, but large scale change will take time. I think big impact projects are things like where you clean up the sea, you clean up the waterways, you at least stop city or town pollution from hitting the rivers. You clean up the cities. The remarkable change in Lahore is staggering. I used to live there in the late 90s when I was in university, Lahore was a very different looking city back then. And in the space of 20 odd years, they've totally changed. It didn't even take 20 years actually. Since they increased the budgets for cleaning the city, they got better organized companies in. Unfortunately, they brought in international companies. I don't see why we need to do that for things like waste management. But I think waste management will have a huge impact because that's something that people can see and notice on a day-to-day basis. It is something that everybody hates
Mm-hmm.
around them. I think cleaning up our water sewage system will have a big impact, and I think planting another billion trees to the first billion. Improving the general environment around us through planting of more and more trees, cleaning up our areas. These are basic things. These are really basic things which have been done everywhere else for decades and decades, and probably even in certain places for centuries. We're lacking at those basic levels. We start
Mm-hmm.
talking about things which people did generations later. We can start off by cleaning up our cities. We can start off by cleaning up our waterways, and that impact will come and is visible from day one. I'm not saying this because I'm doing waste management. There's no way on earth that I can help clean up the rest of Pakistan. That might be a mission, but it's going to take a really long time. It's going to take maybe 100 Davaams to actually pull this off. Uh, but there has to be a start somewhere, you know. People in Pakistan don't want to look at waste. They don't want to work in waste. You have no idea how hard it is for us to even find labor that will work in waste management. That's just a fact. It's a cultural thing over here. So, yeah, we have to beat
Mm-hmm.
that, but it'll take time. But work on large scale projects, plant trees, clean up water, make that necessary for companies to do. I think the high courts took a good, they started it off well, but the government needs to follow through. That's where the government can help. The law is there. You just need to implement it. And if you shut down businesses, they will go and get the necessary equipment to clean up their water or clean up any other waste that they're throwing outside. Don't leave
Mm-hmm.
anyone.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the things that will have an immediate impact within the next 1 or 2 years, and people will appreciate that. And for any political types that are out there, it'll get you re-elected. I guarantee you that.
Yeah.
Or hopefully, I can't guarantee anything,
Yeah.
but hopefully it can get you re-elected. Yes, those
Granted,
are
we
things
come in
that
with an
people
electoral
notice.
system and all of that jazz first, then we'll see.
Whatever. I mean, I'm not into politics, so
Yeah.
but but it works across the board. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't matter if you're in Tharparkar or if you're in Karachi or you're in Lahore or Gujranwala or I don't know Kohat. It makes no difference. Everybody wants a clean place. I have seen agricultural fields on top of landfills in Pakistan where municipal waste was dumped maybe 6 months ago, and then people grew wheat and all sorts of other things on it, and then we consume it. And they, the amazing thing is, all farmers told me, look, it's growing so well, but they don't know what kind of stuff was thrown inside.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, it grows well because there's organic waste in it. But yeah, these are things that will take time. Use high impact projects. I think the government's onto something with this billion tree tsunami. I think the
Mm-hmm.
provincial governments need to follow suit.
Mm-hmm.
Plant a lot more trees. Clean up your cities, for God's sakes. It's really not that hard. It's a budgetary issue, I understand, and unfortunately, like everything else in Pakistan, there's a corruption issue, but it's a very doable thing. I believe that we can clean up all of our cities in the next 3 to 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine in 4 years, if all of our major cities were absolutely clean and the waste wasn't being just disposed of in a landfill, but being recycled or cleaned up and disposed of the way that it should be, the amount of energy that we will produce from that, the amount of byproducts the amount of raw material that we will recover from that is a staggering number. I keep harping on about the fact that Karachi produces, the government might say 12 to 15,000. I believe the number is closer to 20,000 tons per day. 20,000 tons per day, मैं ऐसे बोल देता हूँ. किसी को नहीं समझ में आता, but 20,000 tons का मतलब है 20,000 हाथी. Okay, चलें 10-15,000 बड़े हाथी. We're talking about 20 of those huge dumper trucks, thousands of those huge dumper trucks being used every day just to lift this waste. It's not a joke. I think it should be mandatory for every citizen in every city to go and visit their local landfill once a year and see what they're doing. I guarantee you, if anybody watches this video, you go to the landfill. Number one, don't go there alone. Please go with some security or police. It's not a safe area, but in Karachi, that is. But if you do go, I guarantee you it will change your mind about a lot of things. It will open up your eyes to the way that we're destroying our cities and our waterways. Just because you throw kachra on land doesn't mean कि आपका पानी नहीं गंदा हो रहा. एंड जस्ट बिकॉज आपने अपनी फैक्ट्री में से निकाल के गंद सूरज में डाल दिया, इसका मतलब ये नहीं है कि उसी वीकेंड पे आपके बच्चे और आप जब बीच जाएंगे आप उसी पानी में नहा रहे हैं.
Which is the
और जो
truth.
desalination, it is absolutely true,
Yeah.
but we don't even think like that.
Yeah.
हम अपने अभी just recently the courts closed down this farm in Liari, I think, where they said that that gutter ka pani was being used to grow vegetables. That's common practice across Pakistan.
Mm-hmm.
Just travel across Pakistan, especially if you're in the rural areas or any place where there is farming. That's common practice. There's a lot of way, or in the cities, especially actually, the rural probably not as much, but in the cities, wastewater is used for this all the time. And if I know about them, and majority of the people know about them, I'm sure the agencies, the government, the police, they all know about it. The willingness is just not there. And until people like you and I go and make a fuss about it, nobody's going to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
That's just reality.
Yeah. So I think that's actually a very good point to talk about it on a micro perspective. Is that there's an opportunity for macro change and for on a macro level to bring about that impact through these projects. But then on a micro level, like you said, we can go and make a fuss about it, or we can actually stop our own way of doing things, stop our own or change our consumption patterns rather, and start enforcing that amongst our friends and family in our network, and try to build that network effect of some form of change overall. But
Yeah.
as a final question, actually, Omer, I wanted to ask you was that amongst um, the pandemic, the environmental shifts which are happening, which we're seeing, what do you feel are some opportunities now for SMEs to look into? Or what do you think, if there's not also an opportunity as such that you could share, what do you feel are some steps that they need to take for a post-COVID world?
Okay, SMEs are a different ballgame. Startups or small. I don't like bunching up small and medium enterprise. If you look at the amount of money involved in becoming a medium-sized enterprise, it's crazy to group small companies with medium
Yeah.
enterprises. It's absolutely ridiculous. There's no comparison. So if you're going to talk about small companies, startups, companies that are in their first or second year, like Davaam, I think what you should look at is, again, not what's cool everywhere else. I get calls to start doing EVs and things like that almost on a daily basis. There are hundreds of people sending me stuff about this on a day-to-day basis. Why don't you look into this one? What we are doing is we're trying to set a precedence. You said something to look forward to. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to create a small waste management project and set the precedence for other entrepreneurs to look at it and say something that I can do in my town or in my city or in my village. And they can replicate that over there. Small organizations over the next couple of years. I don't know if you're in tech or things like that. Okay, life's totally different for you. But if you're in the bricks and mortar economy, you're going to be in trouble for the next 2 to 3 years. Number one, right? That's a fact. But I think if you look at it, and what the past 2 or 3 months teaches us is things might break down. People are still going to produce garbage. You might be living at home, you're still producing garbage. The last person to die on this planet will die with garbage on him. I guarantee you that. Right? So Garbage is always going to be there. Agriculture is another place where there's a lot of space for innovation. We have poor, I don't mean economically poor, I mean poor in the form of the kind of decision making done in the agricultural field. I'm not talking about everyone. Again, there's some farmers who are doing some really groundbreaking stuff. They've done a fantastic job, and that's in all provinces. It's not just in Sindh or in Punjab or KP or Balochistan or Gilgit-Baltistan. It's everywhere. There are certain people who are doing fantastic work. I think what needs to be done is highlight that, allow them to teach their practices across the board. I think you'll see better yields. You'll see better water management for, I mean, that's something that's starting to hit Sindh in a really bad way. Certain areas where water levels have fallen to the level where previous agricultural lands are now barren. And it's a very stark thing to see where, there were fields growing a few years ago. Now they don't have enough water for that. So you need to teach people how to handle their water better. Flood irrigation is not the answer. And pretty much every farm in Pakistan does that. There are huge opportunities. You don't need to be a genius. All of these things exist. All of these practices exist. There are a lot of very talented people in the agriculture field in Pakistan who are just waiting for people to come up and set up something where they can add value. Don't wait for that to become the next big thing or for that to be the buzzword. Agriculture was always there. Food will always be needed. It's needed during lockdown and is going to be needed well beyond lockdown. Food never does bad. It always grows. The way the environment is going, food scarcity will become an issue eventually. So yes, I would honestly suggest, as basic as it might sound, that it's going to be things like food, water, sanitation. Those are the three things. I know I'm biased because I'm in this field, but for me, those are the three things over the next decade or the next 2 decades for Pakistan that will make a huge difference. If we can work on these things, if we can secure our water supplies, if we can recycle the water that we're throwing away on a daily basis, if we can reduce soil erosion, if we can reduce the way the sea is impacting and how it's coming inland and destroying a lot of land that was otherwise used for agriculture in the past, make that visible. Normal media doesn't do that. And there's no interest in that because these are stories that happen over 10 years. Just start reading, looking up at opportunities or how things are being done elsewhere. You don't need to invent anything. It's literally taking ideas and taking examples from abroad, from in Pakistan, from within Pakistan, and replicating that in other places across the country. It'll make a really big change, and you can change the way that people live on these farms as well. So it's a holistic change rather than just based around creating more capital for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, what I'm saying is forget about trying to make the next EV. Start thinking about how to create more wheat in the same amount of land with less water. That's going to give you more dividends. I promise you.
And I think that also ties in with just like, well, see, for me, innovation is that only, right? You try to find
Yeah.
it's not sexy, it's not fast, but it gets the job done, and it might get the
Well,
job
it
done
is if
better.
it is if you're talking about a electric roadster, sexy and fast.
Yeah,
But it really depends, man. I mean, if you speak to me on a date, and you have spoken to me in the past, Kachra turns me on. You
yeah,
know, it's just a thing. 10 years ago, I hit this, and I've never looked back.
yeah.
Um, and I think there's a lot of very energetic young people out there with a lot more energy than me and much more creativity than me. Um, and I'm talking about people who are also working. It's not just young people who need to do this. They're people who've got a lot of experience, who understand how businesses work, how the world works. They can do this. I didn't start off young. I didn't start off straight out of university as an entrepreneur. I had 5 failed attempts before Davaam came along. I switched industries all the time. Now, this thing's been with me for the last decade or so, which is great. So it's not too late for anyone. But if you're going
Hmm.
to start up something, or if you're starting up something right now, don't try to sell more shorts or t-shirts or jeans. Enough people doing that.
Hmm.
Find a better way to grow cotton. Find a cheaper way to grow cotton. Find a way that doesn't use as much water, or improve logistics. There's so many holes in the agricultural supply chain. It's unbelievable. And in agri, I'm adding things like dairy, which we deal with on a day-to-day basis. The dairy sector in Pakistan is ridiculous. The inefficiencies are staggering. You don't need to
Hmm.
do anything. Remove inefficiencies, you'll make an insanely large sum of money.
True. And I think that's a good point to end it on. Actually, going back to the basics, going back to the fundamentals of what actually we need to survive at the end of the day, and that's a shift from a more GDP oriented economy also towards a more meaningful economy as well. That just might be the step. Correct?
Yeah, I'm not a fan of GDP as a measure of what the economy is doing, anyways.
Hmm.
Everybody looks to the stock market usually. Yeah, you'd think looking at the stock market that everything's fine right now. It's ridiculous. It's not, right? The
Yeah.
government can pump in money and keep the stock market up. You can fudge numbers and make the GDP look whatever it is, or at least announce that it's this much. 10 economists might disagree with you, but those are the official numbers. Who cares?
Hmm.
But these are real things, forget about GDP, forget about multiples and all of that. If you can grow food, if you can grow water, save water, grow food, and not only Pakistan, the export market's there for you too. Although, again, I'm against the idea of growing food to export it as well, because that's just another form of exporting water. We're growing companies here growing king grass and Rhodes grass for export, and that's almost criminal. I think that should be outlawed in Pakistan. It's a huge waste of water, and it's being sold to countries that don't have as much water. And we should look at conserving water for our own people and for our own agriculture and for our own industry, rather than converting that into grass that will be fed to animals in a barn which houses 50,000 animals in the middle of a desert. I think that's insane.
Hmm. Well, I think that's a good point to end it on. Omar, thank you so much for your time. I don't want to
My
get more
pleasure.
into
I
this
could have gone on.
conversation because yeah, you always
I
end up making me question my living, my life. What am I doing? What am I trying to do to change this?
I,
No, no.
I'm not trying to do that. I'm trying to encourage people to look beyond the obvious. Everybody's interested in the
Yeah,
obvious. Look beyond that. There's a
yeah.
much bigger world out there.
Yeah, yeah, and uh, for all those listening, this is not your average summit. This is actually real conversation with real people who are trying to do big things, trying to bring about a positive net impact in whatever they're doing. So, Omar, once again, thank you
And
for
and
your
before
time.
you go, sorry,
Yeah.
I have to
Yeah.
do a little plug over here,
Uh-huh.
because you should look out for the Davaam pages over the next month or two. We're going to be putting up some really great content about waste management and its impact, and the kind of work that we're trying to do over here and how we're trying to bring about change. So if you are interested in any of these things, you can follow us on Facebook or Instagram, Twitter, etc. But follow
Mm-hmm.
us, and there's a lot of these other small companies to follow. There's a lot of good news out there. Pay more attention to that.
Mm-hmm. Omar, may I put in your email address at the in the descriptions of wherever this is
Sure,
going up?
sure,
Yeah.
of
So
course,
for all those
of course.
listening, you can learn more about Davam on their website, the Facebook page, the social media. It's all linked below. Omar's email address is there as well. Um, but yeah, Omar, thank you very much.
My
Hard talk,
pleasure.
real talk. It's always a pleasure.
Anytime, Asad. Thank you very much for having me.
No worries. Thank you. Take care.